Hello, BookTube. It's Sunday afternoon, and I'm here with another video on my favorite poet, John Clare. I will split this into two videos because I tried doing it in one, and I was just rushing at the end to sort of flip through some publications which deserve a closer look. And those will be in the second edition, second video. Now, John Clare was born 13th of July in 1793 in Helpston, a small village in just outside of Peterborough today. And he had a twin sister that died at birth. And he died on... I forget the exact date. I know it's 1864. I'm just looking it up here. He dies at Northampton Insane Asylum on 20th of May, 1864. He was 70 years old. And we'll get to the reason why he was there eventually. And he was farm laborer for most of his life, or all of his life pretty well, up until he was hospitalized. In 1820, he published his first collection of poetry called Poems Descriptive of Rural Life and Scenery. And he also marries Patty, his first wife. She was 6 months pregnant, so it was a must. And he also and the collection just sold like hotcakes. Well, by 1821, it went into 4 printings, and I believe the first edition was somewhere around 1,000 copies. Second might have been 2,000. So it sold extremely well for the time. He became a celebrity. He was wined and dined by his publisher, John Taylor, in London. He met everyone, the literati of London. And he also had several poems published in the London Magazine, which Taylor was in charge of. And it's a magazine that's still going today. I think it's one of the best sort of all-round poetry, short story, essays, book review journals that's published. I think it's quarterly. And yeah, and he goes back to Helpston, obviously after his London visit, and he got many visitors. He was a celebrity for the time. And he got a lot of letters. He didn't really care for getting the letters, apparently because they were all sort of postage due when they came. So, being very poor, he didn't like that. But he wrote continuously. Like he probably was manic depressive. A bipolar, I guess, is the correct term for this, where he would have spurts of energy and creativity that he would fill notebooks, just fill them with poems. All his manuscripts, the extant manuscripts, are at the Northampton Public Library. And up until just recently, it was because they lost a lot of funding, and it was in jeopardy, the archive. But at the moment, it seems to be safe. They also have his library of books. Many of them are inscribed to him by authors. A lot of poetry. There's natural history, letters, everything. And there was a little booklet published listing all his books. I've got a PDF of it. I'd love to find the actual book. But at some point, somebody decided to sell some of those off sometime in the early to mid 20th century for some unknown reason. There's been the archive has been looked through, but there's still a lot of stuff that is still not published. Eric Robinson was the biggest one that went through this, and he edited a large Oxford University collection of about 9 to 11 volumes of material of poetry, and he kept the original spellings. There's been sort of discussion of whether he should have, or changed it because Clare at times figured he wrote in his vernacular, and he expected the publisher to fix it and put it into normalized English, but it loses something, in my opinion. But it's a bit of a controversy there, as well as the controversy of the copyright issue, which I'm not going to get into. It's interesting, but I'm not going to get into it. But in 1821, his second book was published, called The Village Minstrel and Other Poetry, or Other Poems, I believe. Just trying to, because I never remember the exact title names. Yeah, The Village Minstrel and Other Poems. And that was in 1821. And in 1827, he published The Shepherd's Calendar, which is basically a month-by-month description of rural life. And this is the Oxford University Press 1964 edition, edited by Jacket Seat, always sliding down up for some reason. Edited by Eric Robinson and Jeffrey Summerfield. Wood engravings by David Gentleman. As I say, it's Oxford, 1964. Wonderful illustrations, one for each month at the top. It gives you an idea. Let's find another one. That's September. And it's a wonderful inscription on here, too. It says, "To Elizabeth with much love from Auntie Betty. June 1972. A nice sort of inscription. And that was republished in a second edition in 2014 by Oxford. And it says second edition. I'm not sure exactly. I think there was a few changes or minor changes to this. It's the same illustrator, David Gentleman. And it goes the same. There's February. It's the same. So, but Carcanet Press, which is a very good publisher for poetry, and other items, but they're for me, they're particularly known for their poetry. They did an edition here. It's the manuscript and published version, edited with an introduction by Tim Chilcott. We'll come back to him in a few minutes. This is illustrations by Carrie Ackroyd, who I believe is quite active with the Clare Cottage. And they're just wonderful. They look like, to me, wood carvings, wood cuts. And again, one for every month. So it's interesting to compare the both. Now, his last published book is The Rural Muse. That was done in 1835. I believe. Just need to refresh my memory. Yeah, 1835, and this is the second edition, the second edition of it in 1982, and this is a hardcover of the Carcanet Press in association with the Mid Northumberland Arts Group. It's a nice signed edition. It's an it's signed to a June Council. For June Council with love, Kelsey Thornton, this is edited by R.K.R. Thornton, R.K. Kelsey Thornton, and it's with an essay by Barbara M.H. Strang. And there's an inscription by the owner, June Council, July 16th, 1988, bought at the John Clare Festival, Helpston. So I like things like that. It's a bit rough around the jacket, but it's a nice sort of timely piece and where it was. Now, before that, in 1833, 1832 actually, Clare wanted to publish another volume of poetry, a big volume of poetry. But there was too many delays. They couldn't get a subscription for it. It was called the Midsummer Cushion. And here's the paperback of the Carcanet edition. And it's edited by Kelsley Thornton and Ann Tibble. And that was done in 1990. Also in association with Northumberland Arts Group. Here's the hardcover edition that I have of it, which I was very pleased to get this. It's an odd association copy. It says Ex Libris sticker George MacDonald Fraser. There are signatures in it. George Stevenson, Roy Stevenson, Una Stevenson, George, Renee Chaplin, and Sid Chaplin. And Sid Chaplin says, "What ho." Now, I've looked a little bit of this up, and I believe the Stevenson and possibly the Fraser, they were on, they're connected to this Northumberland Arts Group. Now, there's a couple of Sid Chaplins. There's a Sid Chaplin that is a descendant of Charles Chaplin, son, actually, and I think he had a grandson called Sid Chaplin as well. But there's also a writer or producer for the BBC that was a Sid Chaplin. I haven't done a full search to see what these connections are, but it's very intriguing, and I like the aspect of the connections with this. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to some sort of secondary material of Clare before I continue on, because that's all his published books. Here's a biography, a wonderful biography by Jonathan Bate, published by Picador Press, and 2003, I think. 2003. This is the fourth printing, and I met Jonathan Bate at the Oxford Literary Festival on March 31st, 2012, and got him to sign this. It is wonderful. I've read it once, but I am definitely going to be reading it again. And Jonathan Bate is a wonderful writer. His Wordsworth biography is coming out April 2nd on Wordsworth's birthday. And he's currently working on a Keats biography. Now, other bits here is, this is sort of about the Fens, the area that Clare knew and tramped around. So I thought that was interesting to get because it was quite cheap. And then there's a few critical items here. This is edited by Clare Critical Heritage, edited by Mark Story, and it's a collection of essays. It's Next Library, Routledge, Keegan Paul. I've read a few of them. They are very academic. And then again by Mark Story, The Poetry of John Clare, A Critical Introduction. And I've perused this, read little bits for certain poems, but because I have not, I suppose I'm waiting until I get the complete Oxford edition of Clare's poetry and read it from cover to cover. Then I can read something like this and contend with it and either argue with it or agree. And there's been a lot of material. There's a lot of material like Jonathan Bate. There's other scholars that have published numerous critical studies of Clare within the past 20 years. I hope to get them sometime, but generally they're academic presses, so they're upwards of £80 to £100. Here's I mentioned the big Oxford. Here is the Oxford paperback of the major works, including selections from the Shepherd's Calendar. And this is a bit rough because I used to carry this around in my book everywhere I went when I did go on public transport and anywhere, so I would always pull it out to read. I just love his poetry. I'll just read a stanza of one of them to give you a flavor. From Childhood, it's called. It's a poem. A bits from a poem called Childhood. It's quite long. The past is a magic word, too beautiful to last. It looks back like a lovely face. Who hath not felt the past? There's music in its childhood that's known in every tongue, like the music of the wild wood, all chorus to the song. And as I say, he wrote pastoral stuff, the nature, about rabbits, about birds, about mice, you name it, birds' nests. But he also wrote Gothic. He wrote love poems, everything. That's why it's a little difficult to pigeonhole him, I think, to the peasant poet. But they do seem to do that. Now let's go through the other ones. Mostly, a lot of them are the Carcanet ones. Here's a collection of the Northborough Sonnets, which is wonderful sonnets. And this is published, again, with the Mid-Northumberland Arts Group, with Carcanet Press, edited by Eric Robinson, David Powell, and PMS Dawson, with wonderful spot illustrations throughout. And here is this is the Carcanet Press hardcover of the journals and essays and A Journey from Essex. Now we get to the Essex one. In 1837, 38, 39, 40, and up to 41, he voluntarily went into an asylum or a hospital in Epping Forest called High Beach. But he didn't like it there. But he was quite erratic, apparently, and while he was there, he thought he was Byron at times and rewriting the epic poem Child's Herald. But in 1841, he escaped, and he walked back home. And this is his story of it. He put it down in writing of his walk back, but shortly after that, he thought he would be okay, but his wife and his family couldn't handle him. So, with the help of the local, I forget what lord it was, the area, or landowner, he was sent to the Northampton Insane Asylum. And that's where he stayed for the rest of his life. But he didn't stop writing poetry. He continued to write poetry. Lots of it. Some of it comes down in different form because it was rewritten by one of the nurses there, or the warders. So it's not necessarily his exact words, but that's all we have. But this is the hardcover of the Carcanet Press. And here's John Clare by himself by the Carcanet Press, which includes that plus more material. And this is Carcanet Press Flyfield books. It's edited and introduced by Eric Robinson and David Powell. It was published in 2002. And then there was an Oxford one, Autobiographical Writings. Beautiful jacket by Eric Robinson. Slightly faded on the spine, but hardly at all to mention. It's a blank back jacket. 1983, edited by Eric Robinson with engravings by John Lawrence. And again, all these have just wonderful drawings in. More Carcanet Press. This is my favorite collection of his. It's a champion for the poor. It's political verse and prose, edited by P.M.S. Dawson, Eric Robinson, and David Powell. It's just chock full of just wonderful, wonderful poetry, and very politically charged. As I say, he's more than a peasant poet, and this was published in 2000. And one of the best pieces of writing that I've ever read, and I would say it's right up there, is called an almost epic poem called "The Parish." And it's talking literally about the parish. Like it says here, well, here's the Eric Robinson. This is the Oxford edition. Just beautiful jacket. And by Eric Robinson, notes by David Powell, edited with an introduction by Eric Robinson. It says, in the flap, John Clare was not only one of the finest English nature poets, but also a visionary, and in the parish, a biting satirist and an acid social observer. Clare indeed demonstrates a poetic versatility equalled only by the greatest of English poets. In the 1820s, when he worked in the fields near a small village of Helpston, he was afraid to publish The Parish, his attack on petty injustice. Though he kept it by him, extended it, and sharpened it, it was not published even partially till long after his death, and has received only scant editing since. Now we can appreciate what has been missed. Clare's pictures of parish overseers, ranting preachers, and windbag farmers are sharp, finely etched, even relentless, like the vignettes in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which Clare much admired. What is more, they are created by a man who felt the full weight of their miserable tyranny, who was himself on the threshold of the workhouse, a mild epileptic, and an enemy of all cant. And it's just wonderful. It's just a few thousand lines long, and it's just amazing. I urge anyone to. The Penguin did this is Viking. Sorry, I said Oxford. Sorry, it's Viking. This is a Viking Press, 1983 or 85. Yeah, sorry, 1985 Viking. Penguin did a paperback of it as well. It's out of print now, I think. Other small little editions are things like this, The Dwellers in the Wood, with drawings by Harold Goodwin. Again, just some nice drawings, little poetry. Here is The Wood is Sweet. I don't have I do have a jacket somewhere. I believe I took it off because it smelled a little musty to air it out, but I can't find it at the moment. This is the Bodley Head, sorry. It's poems for young readers chosen by David Powell, introduced by Edmund Blunden. And again, they all have, little etchings. Going back to the Epping Forest in 1841, this is the Tim Chilcott I said we would get back to. This is the living year, 1841. And it's sort of all the poetry he wrote in 1841 with, dates as close as they can get for this. And it's an amazing journey through his mind in many ways. This is by Trent Editions, published in 1999. So that's quite amazing. Oops. My pile is ready to tip. Cottage Tales, which I believe this has... What is this? This might have a lot from the... Yeah, it says, I think maybe from the Village Minstrel, but I think it's just a collection. Cottage Tales, again, edited by Eric Robinson, David Powell, and P.M.S. Dawson. Carcanet Press, published in 1993. Mid-Northumberland Arts Group as well. Here is an old edition of the prose of John Clare. It's edited by J.W. and Ann Tibble, Routledge, Keegan Paul. Let's see here. Yeah, it's got his autobiography bits that are in the other ones. Natural history letters, because he wrote a lot of letters. Fragments. And just, yeah, descriptions. Essays. There's a few essays in here as well. This doesn't say when. It's Keegan Paul, Routledge Keegan Paul, published 1951. Let's see. Yeah, I did the songs. This is a interesting one I picked out. I never seen it before. I never knew about it, but I saw it in a charity shop, and it was only a couple pounds. It's Clare's. What's it called? Clare's Countryside Selected and introduced by Brian Patton, illustrated by Ann Arnold, edited by Eric Robinson, Heinemann, Coyote Press. See there, and just the full page colored or paintings. So that's quite nice. It's nice to peruse, but there is also there's fiction that's been written about John Clare, and this one is The Quickening Maze by Adam Folds, published in 2009, and it says based on the real events of the Epping Forest on the edge of London around 1840. Quickening Maze centers on the first incarceration of the great nature poet John Clare. And this is the first edition, Jonathan Cape, signed by Adam Folds and dated, I believe, the first day of publication. Here is The Poet's Wife by Judith Allnutt. Yeah, this is sort of him coming back after he returns, and his wife finds him sitting on the footstool, it says. So this is about that, and I miss getting. She, I think, showed up at the John Clare cottage a number of years ago, and I meant to go and have it signed, but I never did. Sadly, mine got a bit sunned, so I'm going to have to replace this at some point, and same as the arc that I have of it. Sadly, it's sunned. I think this one's okay. I had some books that got sunned, sadly. And then here's another one, The Ballad of John Clare by Hugh Lupton, and tells the story of 12 momentous months in the early life of John Clare. We see him courting his childhood sweetheart, laboring in the fields, having his first sexual encounter, and playing the fiddle with the village band. I've not read this yet, so I don't know, but I don't know if there's any others fiction that has been written about John Clare, but if there is, if anybody knows, do shout out in the comments. I'd love to know. I'll end it there because I got just a little over a minute to go. The second part of this video will be on the Arbor editions that are new publications that deserve a closer look at rather than rushing through them. So thanks for watching BookTube, and I will see you a bit later, and I will put information in the comment section. Take care.